The Jesuits have taken over America, and they've put upon us this national pandemic disgrace, disruption. Of course, it's bogus, the pandemic. And we see a demonstration of Jesuit power worldwide that has never been demonstrated on this magnitude before. Every nation that's shut down is run by the Jesuits or their agents. And there aren't any nations that have not shut down, to my knowledge. So this is a tremendous demonstration of their power. And it rests upon the ignorance of the people who know not where this is from. And the responsibility lies squarely on the shoulders of the ministers of the gospel who should have told us with their thousands of voices throughout this country, the Jesuits are upon us. We read from my book titled Vatican Assassins on page 717, chapter 31, from a tremendous author who was a Roman Catholic, an ex-Roman Catholic priest turned evangelical Lutheran minister. His name is L. Aloysium Giustiniani. And he wrote this work in 1843 and it's titled Papal Rome as It Is by a Roman. We do well to take heed to these Bible-believing historians who've suffered under the oppression and tyranny of Jesuit Romanism. And so he writes, quote, America is the promised land, the land of the Jesuits' operations to obtain the ascendancy. They have no need of a mercenary Swiss guard or the assistance of the mighty bayonets of the Holy Alliance, but a majority of votes which can easily be obtained by an importation of Roman Catholic voters from Ireland, Bavaria, and Austria. Rome, viewed at a distance, is a colossus. Near at hand, its grandeur diminishes, its charm is lost. But the Jesuits are everywhere the same, cunning, immoral, and sneaking intriguers until they have obtained the ascendancy. Is this not all what we're going under now, a sneaking intrigue? Jesuit Fauci, Jesuit Redfield, Jesuit Como, Jesuit Trump, Jesuit Newsom, all these Jesuit governors, president, and scientists, all of them working for the order. Establishing their ascendancy is seeking to move the world further to their new world order, their Novus Ordo Seclorum, to which end they are working to centralize all power into the hands of one man of their choosing. But the Jesuits are everywhere the same, cunning, immoral, and sneaking intriguers until they have obtained the ascendancy. Rome feels her weakness at home. She knows herself to be a mere political institution dressed in the garment of Christianity. She takes good care to uphold that holy militia, the Jesuits, in order to appear what she is not. It is strife for existence. Get that? The holy militia of the Jesuits. That's in their fourth vow. They're called their Holy Father and the Holy Militia. You see, it's a military order. The Jesuits are soldiers. Napoleon said the general seeks absolute power over everything. I am not a politician, but knowing the active spirit of Jesuitism and the indifference of the generality of Protestants, I have no doubt whatsoever that in 10 years, that's 1853, the Jesuits will have a mighty influence over the ballot box, and in 20, that's 1863, they will direct it according to their own pleasure. Indeed, as they have done throughout the 20th century. Read the book, Vote Scam, Collier and Collier. There are no elections. The News Election Service chooses the president. Who runs the News Election Service? All the big networks. Who runs them? The Jesuits who control the CFR. They control the voting here. You don't think you're really voting for president, do you? Now they fawn. In 10 years, they will menace. And in 20, command. Religion has nothing to do with the political institutions of America. The exaltation or depression, the triumph or defeat of religious denominations is of no importance in the political order of the United States. It is not so with Rome. Everything in popery tends to Rome. She exercises an immense power over her ministers, and through them over her faithful adherents. Consequently, the chief, all caps, of this militia, everywhere to be found, is the Pope. The Pope has his faithful militia, the Jesuits in all their dominions. You see, the Jesuits are the light horse of the Pope. They're the Marine Corps. They're the first ones that land and storm the beaches and take the beachheads, and then from there build the power of the papacy in that country. When FDR recognized the USSR in December of 1933, the man who sat next to him in the White House while he did this was that all-powerful Jesuit from Georgetown University, the founder of Georgetown's Foreign Service. It was none other than Edmund A. Walsh. Walsh, the Jesuit from Georgetown, ran FDR. And he also ran Joseph Stalin, because Walsh was in Russia from 1922 to 1924, making sure that the government established in Russia after the Revolution and Civil War was exactly what the Jesuits wanted. And it's intriguing, while Walsh is there in Russia in 1924, Lenin is poisoned, making way for the great Jesuit Grand Inquisitor of Russia, Joseph Stalin, the man of steel and with a heart of stone. The Pope has his faithful militia, the Jesuits in all their dominions. What an immense power, what an inconceivable influence. If the whole world were Roman Catholics, the Pope would command the world. And all the millions of ministers would be under his authority, directed by his will, and all would be obliged to promote the interests of Rome. If the whole world, I repeat, would be Roman Catholic, it would shake, subjugate, and corrupt the world as it did for ages and is now actually doing in Europe. Well, what this priest did not see, what Brother Giustiniani did not see, was that the Jesuits would control all the religions without having to make them Roman Catholic. And as long as they control the ministers and the leaders, it doesn't matter what your title is. All the Protestant denominations today, those that are a part of the World Council, National Council of Churches, are all Roman Catholic, busy serving the Pope. And all the Baptist churches, many of them are well-counseled churches also. Northern Baptists, Southern Baptists aren't in it, but they're close. All the Jesuits needed to do was to neutralize Protestantism and the Baptist churches through a compromise by getting them to read from a corrupted Bible based on a corrupted Greek text, where they will have no power to resist Rome because those Bibles are Roman Bibles. And then after that, the Jesuits, using their Lyndon Baines Johnson, that serial adulterer, would then author and pass Section 501c3 in the Internal Revenue Code in 1954. And so thereby, the Protestants and the Baptists will come on their hands and knees begging for a tax exemption from the IRS. And they will get it if they do or don't do certain things that will benefit the papacy, like preach against sin. Papacy loves sin. That's why it justifies more police, more cops. When a preacher preaches against the sin of the culture, the sin dies down, and there's not a justification for more government. So you just make sure that you, pursuant to public policy, you don't preach against certain sins, or the corruption in the government, or the treason of your political leaders. You don't preach from that in the pulpit. We're in church now. Hey, the true Protestants and the true Baptists went after those political traitors and cowards from the pulpit. And that's what we're supposed to do. But the Jesuits have conquered Protestantism in most Baptist churches. They're all silent. They're all going along with the program. Where are the preachers that rise up and say, listen, this coronavirus is bogus. Wearing a mask, what for? You want to make me sicker? Huh? And you're not going to serve me if I don't wear a mask? What are they going to do when they order you to give up all your guns? They ordered you to put on a mask. You're going to give up your gun too? The Jesuits have neutralized the Protestant churches and the Baptists, for the most part, these believers being the foundation of the establishment of this country. So it doesn't matter what your tag is. As long as you don't resist the Roman papacy, you're Catholic. As long as you don't tell the truth about the Roman Catholic institution and the Jesuits, you're Roman Catholic, whether you're a Jew, a Muslim, or a Hindu. Doesn't matter. Just shut your mouth, boy, while we're busy subjugating the world for our Pope, for our infallible Pope, who will one day, the final Pope, be the Antichrist. So just stay out of our way now. Americans, Protestants, not to know how to foresee is not to know how to govern or how to profit by the past or to judge the world. Have you not apostolical vicars in the United States who have no other mission than to promote the private interest of Rome? They were called apostolic delegates before 1984. After Reagan acknowledged the sovereign state of Vatican City with the help of the Senate, now they're called papal nuncios. When there's a formal recognition of the sovereign state of Vatican City, the Vatican sends a representative called a papal nuncio to the capital of that country, and ours is in Washington, D.C., at the papal nuncio's residence, and he has ingress and egress with the White House and the president anytime he wants to go in, because he's representing the Pope, the king of the world, the master, the commander-in-chief. Why do you think the Italians in 1870 took the temporal power from the Pope with the great Victor Emmanuel II? And he told Pius IX, I have temporal power. You have spiritual power, but I am the king of Rome, not you. And Pius IX locked himself in the Vatican, considered himself a prisoner because he didn't have the temporal power anymore, the right to rule Italy and other nations. Those Italian Roman Catholics know all about temporal power, at least back then. Garibaldi, Emmanuel, and those other great Italian patriots who threw off the temporal power of the Pope, opened up the Inquisition, the Roman Inquisition, and found the people had been walled up to die, found the horrible, terrible tortures of the Inquisition. Those Italian patriots were so furious that they came out of those inquisitional dungeons and they cried, "Death to the Pope! Death to the Pope!" And they made an effigy of the Pope and they took it down to the river and they threw it in the Tiber River. That's what those Italian Republicans did in 1870. You get my book, Vatican Assassins. I have a book that I copied called Popery, Puseyism, and Jesuitism, written by Luigi de Santis. And his entire book, written in there in what 1872-73, tells of what those wonderful Italian patriots did in throwing off the temporal savage power of the Pope of Rome. Victor Emmanuel paid dearly for that. He was poisoned along with his entire family. When men resist the Jesuits, they know they have a price to pay. It's like John F. Kennedy, when he said, if they want to, they can even get me in church. He knew what he was doing. His father was a Knight of Malta. His father caused the Great Depression. He knew exactly what he was doing. Kennedy was a Knight of Columbus. And when he threw off the temporal power of the Pope, threatened to break the CIA into 1,000 pieces, working for Francis Cardinal Spellman, he knew that they were going to try to get him, but he had some virtue at that time. And he loved his country more than he loved the papacy. And for that, the Jesuits condemned him, killed him at 12:30 in the afternoon in Dallas, November 22nd, 1963. And they watched his wife, Jackie, for several years. Her confessor was a Jesuit named Richard McSorley. And she had to confess to him, and he had to know her mind if she was going to say anything. And finally, they get her to marry off this Greek tycoon who's a Knight of Malta and send her out of the country with her 2 little children rather than kill them. This is called Jesuit power. Then, Jesuit power today, and the Jesuit power that we're being warned about by this great Roman Catholic priest turned Bible-believing Lutheran minister. Have you a right to choose bishops of your country, as is the case in Europe? No. That's why we got a Mexican bishop that's the Archbishop of the city of Los Angeles. He's not American born, he's Mexican born. He's a foreigner. In Germany, they passed a law that no bishop or archbishop could be other than German. And you're not appointing some foreign Frenchman to govern us here. That's how they destroy nationalism. The papacy is the great enemy of nationalists. In France, Prussia, Bavaria, Saxony, and even in Austria, the kings and the emperor choose their own bishops. No government or power would accept a bishop in its dominion who was not elected by them. The Pope must sanction it. I say the Pope must sanction their choice. And if he refuses to give a sanction, they compel His Holiness to do so, as it was in Prussia with the Archbishop of Cologne and in Hungary with the primate of that country. The Prussians didn't put up with it. The Protestant Prussians said, oh no, we have elected a bishop here in Cologne, and he's going to ask where he's going to stay. And if you don't like a pope, that's too bad. Why, that's infringing on the temporal power of the Pope. And so you know what the Jesuits are going to do to Prussia for that? It's called World War I and World War II, the Second 30 Years' War. Because this is written in 1843. So they're going to incite the First World War. They're going to break up the Protestant Empire there. And the Second 30 Years' War, they're going to kill millions of beautiful white German Saxons who refused to submit themselves to the temporal power of the Pope. Many Catholics also, too, were killed because they were deemed liberals. Why do you think the Jesuits used Allied bombing to bomb Bavaria, to bomb Munich? It wouldn't bomb Bamberg now. That's where the Jesuits were held up, and that was their little town. Oh, no. You interfere with the temporal power of the Pope, and you had better know the Lord. You had better be saved. Otherwise, the devil is coming after you. Reagan started to interfere with the temporal power of the Pope. He wanted to have some limited government. So you know what? We'll just have a little accident here. We'll have a shooting, and we'll blame Hinckley for it. But the one who does the shooting is the Secret Service agent there, Jerry Parr. He'll shoot Reagan. Reagan will have his life saved by a Jew, a Jewish doctor. And from then on, Reagan will completely toe the line. He has his skull and bonesman for vice president, George Herbert Walker Bush, that evil, wicked sinner, running much of the drug trade into this country at the time. And they'll do exactly what the Pope tells them to do. Because disobedience brings punishment, especially if you're a man of political power. And disobedience brings punishment if you're a man of financial power, too. Because the Jesuits respect financial power, political power, religious power, and military power. Those are the four powers they absolutely covet and respect. Therefore, they must control them if they're going to keep the temporal power in place in any country, specifically this one. But for the wants of America, the Pope graciously provides. He sends his minions who serve under His Holiness's banner and not under the starred flag of the Union. In Austria, no priest can regularly officiate without being a native Austrian or having obtained the imperial permission to do so. In Prussia, no Roman Catholic priest can take charge of a parish without being a native Prussian or obtaining a special royal permission, which is not so easily obtained. And this was during the time Protestantism was growing in Prussia. And in 1870, they would establish the Second Reich, which would be Protestant, with the great Otto von Bismarck, the Bible-believing Lutheran. The same cautious state policy is adopted in France and in every other kingdom and principality of Europe to prevent the fatal influence of Jesuitism, which convulsed the peace of Europe, which was the cause of so many wars and bloodshed, of which the history of Europe is so unhappily full. America, at this time in 1843, is the only land where Rome can work without impediment. America is the stage of papal action, where her hired servants, a swarm of Irish priests, German monks, Italian friars, and Roman Jesuits, overflow the country in order to promote Pope Gregory's, that's Gregory the 16th, interest and oppress religious and political liberty. This is the testimony of a man who was raised around Jesuits. He was Italian Roman Catholic. He saw how they worked in Italy. He knew their power. And he was warning us Americans of what the Jesuits are doing here, that they work without impediment, without restraint. And that restraint, that no impediment, no restraint, would ultimately culminate in the Jesuits taking our country on March 9th, 1933, with Franklin Damnable Roosevelt and his mentor, his guide, his overseer, Jesuit Edmund A. Walsh of Georgetown University, who at the time of the Nuremberg trials had the rank of Army Colonel, and he could dictate who would be condemned and who would be freed, as the case of Franz von Papen, the Vice Chancellor of Adolf Hitler. Do you realize he was released at Nuremberg? He was a Knight of Malta. He brings Hitler to power. But at the motion of Jesuit Edmund A. Walsh, Robert Jackson, the American prosecutor who would one day be a Supreme Court justice, let Franz von Papen go. This is the power of the Jesuit order, to be able to release a man really more powerful than Hitler, the man who signed the Concordat between the Pope and Nazi Germany in 1933, released and goes on to live a happy little life and dies in 1966. Brother John Phelps back with the reading of our quotation from L. Aloysium Giustiniani of 1843, an ex-Italian Roman Catholic priest turned evangelical Lutheran ministry. He was saved out of his book Papal Rome as It Is by a Roman, writing this in 1843, continuing. Protestants, the political regime of the United States pleases Rome. It gives her means of hoping soon to become the mistress of the North, as she is of South America. The Roman clergy of the United States, like that of Ireland, is very devoted to the Pope, very rigorous and submissive in Rome's orders. Soon she will, may the Lord prevent it, occasion embarrassment to the United States, as that of Ireland does to the British government. Columbia, America. In the District of Columbia, Columbia is a woman, after the pattern of the Virgin Mary. Okay, District of Columbia is the District of the Virgin Mary. Columbia, thou land of freedom, asylum of the oppressed, the tyrant's scourge and freeman's joy. That's F-R-E-E-M-A-N, a freeman. Teach all about that in my private citizenship class. Pattern of all nations and the people's country. Shall Yucatans, that's Mexico and Central America's, doom be thine? Wilt thou allow thy cherished sons to become slaves of Jesuits, and thy lovely daughters to be demoralized by priests and monks as those in Italy? I would add through the confessional. If you want to see what they do, just read the book by Charles Chineke. It's titled The Priest, the Woman, and the Confessional. And there's another book titled Why Priests Should Wed by Justin Fulton. Tells you all the scandalous things they do in the confessional. That's why the Roman Catholic women of Roman Catholic countries are immoral, and true Protestant women reading the Bible of a Catholic culture are not like that. Wilt thou permit thy political institutions, which have been dearly bought with the blood of thy firstborn heroes, to be effaced by the coward hand of a priest who sways his bloody scepter in Rome? That's the Pope. No, that cannot be. Thou art young, it is true, but wise enough. And then he sums it up. Thou art inexperienced in the stratagems of Jesuits, intrigues of monks, and finesse of popery, but thou art strong enough to strike the blow in time, unquote. That blow was not struck. Rather, the Jesuits struck the blow, and it was called the War Between the States from 1861 to 65. After which the Jesuits completely controlled this country. They controlled every president thereafter, after they assassinated Lincoln. And by March 9th, 1933, they would control FDR, and from then on, they built their military government with their military empire around the world. And Giustiniani warned us of that. I want to read to you another portion of a work called The Wandering Jew. It was a masterpiece. It was written in 1848, and it contributed to the expulsion of the Jesuits from France in 1848. Read on page 313. He says, quote, "It is true," said the Marquis, after a moment's silence, what might not to be sacrificed in order to reign in secret over the all-powerful of the earth, who lord it in full day? This journey to Rome, from which I have just returned, has given me a new idea of our formidable power. For Germania, it is Rome which is the culminating point, overlooking the fairest and broadest quarters of the globe, made so by custom, by tradition, or by faith. Thence can our workings be embraced in their full extent. It is an uncommon view to see from its height the myriad tools whose personality is continually absorbed into the immovable personality of our order. He's talking about the Borg. He's talking about Joe Biden, Donald Trump, all these sinners. They're absorbed into the huge personality of the order. What a might we possess! Verily, I am always swayed with admiration, I almost frightened, that man once thinks, wishes, believes, and acts as he alone lists, until, soon ours, he becomes but a human shell. Its kernel of intelligence, mind, reason, conscience, and free will, shriveled within him, dry and withered by the habit of mutely, fearingly bowing under mysterious tasks, which shatter and slay everything spontaneous in the human soul. Then do we infuse in such spiritless clay, speechless, cold, and motionless as corpses, the breath of our order. And lo, the dry bones stand up and walk, acting and executing, though only within the limits which are circled round them evermore. Thus do they become mere limbs of the gigantic trunk, which impulses they mechanically carry out, while ignorant of the design, like the stone cutter who shapes out a stone unaware if it be for a cathedral or bagnio. A bagnio is a brothel, whorehouse. This is one of the greatest descriptions of how the Society of Jesus works, and all of its agenteurs, its soldiers, work for it. But let's turn to page 314. Well, let's just look back for a moment. Notice what he says. What a might we possess! Verily, I am always swayed with admiration, I almost frightened, that man once thinks, wishes, believes, and acts as he alone lists, until soon ours, he becomes but a human shell. What do you think the TV's about? What do you think programming is about? What do you think television is about? What do you think channels are about? The television its purpose is to turn us all into practical Jesuits without a will or mind of our own. That all we do is what they tell us to do, what they encourage us to do. That's why the vast majority of Americans are communists. What do you mean the left? The left, communist left, is Jesuitism. And the pagan right, alt-right and others, is pagan Jesuit fascism. They're the same isms run by the same Jesuits, but they infuse in the minds of the people all of this evil, wicked philosophy, theology, atheism, you name it, and they become Jesuits in their heart and minds and will do the bidding of the order because they've been programmed for years. And then, verily, I am always swayed with admiration, I almost frightened, that man once thinks, wishes, believes, and acts as he alone lists, until soon ours, he becomes but a human shell, its kernel of intelligence, mind, reason, conscience, and free will, shriveled within him, dry and withered by the habit of mutely, fearingly bowing under mysterious tasks, which shatter and slay everything spontaneous in the human spirit soul. If you go over to the Jesuit Spiritual Center over here in Wernersville, they have their 30-day Ignatius Loyola spiritual exercises. When you're walking around there, you can't talk. It's silence. That's the rule of the house. I've been there when they're doing it. so they can get you completely wrapped into the mental thinking of their order. And then when they break it to you, just who they control in the political scene, you think, oh my God, what kind of power do these men have? That's why G. Gordon Liddy wrote of the Jesuits at Fordham that they rule the world and they enjoy it. We read, then do we infuse such spiritless clay, speechless, cold, and motionless as corpses. Fauci's like a corpse. Redfield's like a corpse. Biden's like a corpse. Obama's like a corpse. Trump's like a corpse. He's a comical corpse, but he's like a corpse. He's going to do exactly what they tell him to do. And he's got his Roman Catholic wife there with him. Why wouldn't he? And he's got the Knights of Malta protecting him with Blackwater. Why wouldn't he do what they tell him to do? Because he knows if he steps one step out of line, some Blackwater bodyguard's going to put a knife in him or poison him or something, but he's going to bite the dust, as did Ron Brown and a host of other men in politics over the past. Paul Wellstone. You don't oppose the Jesuit war in Iraq now, Paulie, because we're going to kill you, and we're going to kill your wife and your children on that airplane, and that's exactly what happened. Then do we infuse in such spiritless clays, speechless, cold, motionless as corpses, the breath of our order, and lo, the dry bones stand up and walk. That's a reference to Ezekiel 37 concerning Israel. Acting and executing through only within the limits, though only within the limits which are circled around them evermore. Thus do they become mere limbs with a gigantic trunk, which impulses they mechanically carry out, while ignorant of the design, like the stone cutter who shapes out a stone, unaware if it be for good or evil, cathedral or bagnio. That's why a maxim of the Jesuit order is complete and total obedience. You do exactly what we tell you to do. You're a stick in the hands of an old man, and the words of the general are the words of God, and whatever he commands you will do. There's no such thing as a disobedient Jesuit. If they are, they're terminated. Like Lacunza, when he wrote his great work on the future of the coming great tribulation, the second coming of Christ in the millennial kingdom, when he finished writing that work, he was found dead in a ditch in Trent, Italy, during the suppression of the order. You don't dare publish anything like that. Lacunza will kill you. We finish up on page 314 of The Wandering Jew. Aye, that was greatness. But now, in spite of the misfortunes which have befallen our order, now this is in the 1800s. This is when the Jesuits were expelled from nearly all the countries in Europe. They called this the century of disaster, the 1800s. I feel myself 1,000 times more ready for action, more authoritative, more strong, and more daring. At the head of our mute and black-robed militia who only think and wish or move and obey mechanically according to my will. So he's talking as the Jesuit general here. On a sign they scatter over the surface of the globe, gliding stealthily into households under the guise of confessing the wife or teaching the children, into family affairs by hearing the dying of owls. Jesuits do that. They come into your house under different guises. They want to see how you live, who you are, what you do. I had one come to my house one time. He called me, he called anonymously, asked if he could come over and interview me. I said, okay. I had a brother here with me, and a guy rides up on a bicycle. And he's a younger man. He's balding. And he asked me some questions, kind of offensive questions, so I kind of let him have it back. But he rode out of here on that bike, and there was no way that I could trace who he was, because that's the way he wanted it. Now, I have no doubt he was an emissary, but that's okay. I'll talk to them and anybody else because I got the same thing to say to everybody. Up to the throne through the quaking conscience of a credulous crowned coward. That's what we have here in America, a credulous crowned coward. Because Donald Trump will do exactly what the Jesuits tell him to do. Move the capital to Israel, to Jerusalem. Okay. Bomb President Assad of Syria. Okay. He gets his orders from the Pope. Francis and Trump are not enemies. They're secret admirers of one another because Trump is furthering the temporal power of the Pope through what he's doing now with the coronavirus bogus hoax and the masks and calling for ventilators and doing anything other than what would really help these people, and definitely don't talk about 5G and it's 60 hertz. Even to the chair of the Pope himself, living manifesto of the Godhead though he is, by the services rendered him or imposed by him. You see, at this time, at the time of the Wandering Jew, the Pope had not been declared to be infallible. That would come in 1870 at the First Vatican Council. This was written as 1848, some 22 years before that day. But they're going to make him infallible. So that through this doctrine of infallibility of the Pope, the Jesuit Curia in the Vatican, subject to the Black Pope, can tell the Pope exactly what to do, and all the other orders will follow in line and obey. Because to disobey the Pope is to disobey God. So if the Jesuit general who's worshiping the devil tells the Pope what to do, the Pope is going to do it. Especially now because Pope Francis I is a Jesuit himself. Is not this secret rule made to kindle or glut the wildest ambition? As it reaches from the cradle to the grave, from the laborer's hovel to the royal palace, from palace to the papal chair? What career in all the world presents such splendid openings? What unutterable scorn ought I not to feel for the bright butterfly life of early days when we made so many envy us? This is the power of the Jesuit order. This is their power today. They're more powerful today than they have ever been. And my question is, when are you men of power, you white men of power and finance, going to start helping us that are exposing the Jesuits and calling for their expulsion? When are you going to help us? You need to know we live from month to month. We don't have any money saved. We don't have anything except we trust God in faith to provide for us every week, and we continue at the helm of exposing the Jesuit order, and we will not be silenced until we bleed our last or breathe our last. One last quote. When the Jesuit is expelled from one place, he is not slow to find another. France may reject him, not without cause. But England opens her arms to him. It's exactly what happened when the Pope suppressed the Jesuits in 1773. England opened the arms to the Jesuits and George III. Catholic Italy may deprive him of the glories of his once famous home of the Jesuit. That's when the Italian King Victor Emmanuel expelled the Jesuits from Rome and took the Pope's temporal power. Catholic Italy may be deprived him of the glories of his once famous home in the Jesuit, that's the Jesuit headquarters in Rome. But America opens her doors to him. That's right, there's 23 Jesuit universities in this country, and through those universities they run the major cities in which they're located. Boston, Chicago, Philadelphia, New York, St. Louis, San Francisco, Kansas City, New Orleans. All these places have massive Jesuit universities, and they control the commercials, capital of the world, the Federal Reserve Bank, the capitals of the country. They control the police chiefs of those cities. They run it all. And through their controlled press, that keeps silence, and nobody's writing about it. He is the wandering Jew of the Romish church. He is followed by the execrations of those by whom he was once beloved until they discovered his iniquities. Unquote. M.F. Cusack, 1896, converted nun of Kenmare Convent in her classic work, The Black Pope. Brethren, we see what the Lord Jesus Christ has done for us in the first hour. We see what the devil is doing to us in the second hour through his Jesuit order. I encourage you, it's time to tell the truth about them, to expose them as to what they're done and what they're doing. All I can do is tell you and pray for you and trust the Lord that he'll move. And may there be a great awakening in this country as to who rules, what they've done, and what they intend to do. May God raise up God-fearing, Bible-believing men and women to do their duty while we still can. Brother John Phelps, thank you for tuning in today. I have a book, Vatican Assassins, Wounded in the House of My Friends. Please go to my website, VaticanAssassins.org, purchase the ebook. Hopefully someday I'll be able to republish the book, but not anytime soon. And I have a series of things that I offer. I offer my private citizenship course where you can be separate from the all caps entity and be the private citizen. Once again, the citizenship that all Americans held prior to March 9th, 1933. Also offer a particular private irrevocable ecclesiastical trust that I'm the trustee and you or your family are beneficiaries. You put all your property in that and it can't be taken from you because it's not yours. Carry your trust wherever you go in your car. I also have the information to get you in touch with someone who can provide fixed index annuities for you, to take your money from your 401k or your IRAs and put it there so you don't lose it with the coming crash they're going to have. You can sign up for me, under Carrot Bars, and begin to work Carrot Bars. It's a great little business. You can save in grams of gold. I also have health cards. I just finished up a couple for a couple of brethren here this morning, so that when they want to force you to a vaccination, you hand them the card, and they're not going to do it because they're going to be liable for what they do. So everybody needs the anti-vaccination card. Need to get it. And there are other things that I have. So I trust the Lord that we will begin to do our duty, that we will separate from sin, from sinful associations, that we will hate certain sinful habits that we all have, and that will mortify the deeds of the flesh, that we might be blessed of the Lord. That we will continue to preach the true gospel of Christ, how Christ died for our sins, was buried, and rose again, calling all men everywhere to repent, preaching the gospel to all men, warning every man, teaching every man, that we might present every man perfect in Christ, knowing that we do all things for the elect's sake. We pray that we will continue to defend the right of the Hebrew Jewish Israelites to their land, the nation of Israel, that it belongs to no one but them, pursuant to the Abrahamic covenant of Genesis 15. We pray that we'll continue to defend the Protestant Reformation that brought blessing and wealth and middle class and prosperity among peoples that had the faith and courage to separate from Rome and denounce it as a mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. And lastly, will you join me in resisting the Jesuit order here in America? Send your gift to RBT, P.O. Box 306, New Misstown, Pennsylvania, 17073. Or you can use PayPal, rbpbdonate@comcast.net. rbpbdonate@comcast.net. You can also sign up on Patreon. You can spend $1 a month, whatever you want to do, and you can read all my most recent posts. I put some up last night.